So this is a quick walkthrough of our water harvesting system as it currently stands, and a few upgrades we've got planned for mostly this year actually. So orientation, that way south. This is the very top section of the property, and then going around you can see the house and the duck and chicken systems down there. So as I say, this is the very top earthwork. At the moment it's mostly just a small wildlife pond. Again, we'll plant this berm, same as everywhere else, to species that'll come up and give a low edge. So we've got a cup face pointing south, so we've got a nice little microclimate for growing something a bit more sensitive. Now, part of the design for this place, for this pond rather, is in this corner. In fact, I'll come up here and show you. This that I'm stepping up onto here, under here, is rock solid. It's an actual old roadway running straight here. You can almost see it. There's a slightly darker strip running through here. That's where the old drainage ditch was. So we're going to reactivate that drainage ditch to help drain the top section here a little bit, to keep it a bit drier in winter. So that'll drain into this pond, and in the far corner of this pond, let's get around. It's about 2 years old, this one. It's just getting established, but this, when it gets fuller, water comes through and gets picked up by that land drain that runs that direction and then turns into a different style of land drain and runs downhill at 90 degrees. So all water that runs into here, which effectively drains this area quite nicely. You can see how unhealthy the rushes are, they're not happy. All the water that ends up in here drains out through that land drain down to that next earthwork. We'll have a look at that now. So this is the next earthwork down that we just looked at. This pond's quite low. It hasn't been planted up really yet. It's had a few things go in, but we haven't kept on top of it really. It's the newest pond. It's not particularly well sealed yet, but you can see here, let me show you, just where are we, there, that's where the land drain comes in, that runs in from that earthwork, so we can have that water overspill straight into this with no overland flow between, which will keep that area there, which as you can see is where we're going to have customers eventually. It's going to be nice, well drained and perfect for the orchard that slowly is being introduced here. But this pond here is fed by this swale, and we've got an adjustable monk running into the pond from a swale. So I can use, in fact, yeah, let's start over at that end. That's the best way. Right, so I'm over at the other end of that swale now. So this barn isn't ours, but all the water that falls from that side of the ridge line for this whole area here, and it's a huge area, we get 100% runoff that comes down, and we get the water from that. So this very short length of swale here picks up the water that runs off that barn, but the bottom of that swale is 4 inches higher than the bottom of this swale that runs out on contour over to that pond we were just at. Now what that means is that, hang on, let me show you this quick. There's a pipe that runs from here under the track that needs a bit of repair currently, but under the track, and comes out there. So the water that runs off the barn overland runs under the track and fills this swale. But at that end of the swale, at this end of the swale, I've got a pipe monk fitted, which is just a 90-degree swivel mounted on the pipe, so I can turn that up. It's a lot easier with 2 hands, you get the idea. So I can swivel that up, so I can force the water to stay in the swale, backflood all the way up, and when that is fully vertical, that will flood the entire swale and through the pipe and the other end of the swale, so I can infiltrate water through this whole section evenly down through the topsoil and through the berm. Now the main objective of this swale isn't actually to collect water. The objective of this is just to create a mound that's a good foot higher than the surrounding land, so that we've got somewhere drier to plant trees that don't like it particularly wet, because that can be an issue here in summer. But with this set to fully drain and the drainage trench running along the top and into the top pond, and then skipping this whole area inside and coming out in that pond, should dry out this whole area pretty significantly, because we're up on the ridge here, there's no overland flow at all. And really it's only going to be taking currant bushes and dwarf trees, because obviously south is behind me, that's north, so we wouldn't want a huge canopy up here, because in winter that would create far too much shade for the house, and obviously we want as much sun as we can in the house in winter. Now this is the spillway. It's quite a big one for a fairly small swale, but that's because we've got obviously potentially quite a bit of runoff from that barn, plus this whole area could be coming through this fairly narrow area. So when it all builds up to a level where everything's full, this section here is completely level, or to within like 1/4 of an inch or so, and then water will run evenly over this section, which you can see is grassed, it's fairly compacted, and sheet evenly down in that direction, and that'll get picked up by the next swale. So this is the next swale down. You can see we've dumped a load of water into it yesterday, and that's now being absorbed by the berm and all the grass is downhill. In fact, you can see just behind the berm the grass is a little bit greener because it's had water in it a few times. The reason we're watering it is because this is a new type of willow. It's a hybrid variety that we're trialing. This one and the next swale down are both going to be planted to willow, so we've got that as a biomass crop for running the mass systems, different types. So we want this to do well, so we got plenty for next year. You can see there's a fair bit running down. So yeah, and you can see here that you can see how level it is. It's like a canal basically. It's completely on contour. And at the other end of this swale there is a small berm. You can see the shape of that again. It's a fairly cup-shaped berm pointing south behind me. So again, we'll get something tender in there. Around here I've got a little seat. There's a mouse then. So yeah, I can have a nice sit down and look out, and of course this will have willow across it eventually, so it'll be a nice little sheltered spot. And we've got a little wildlife pond at the end. We've got newts and all sorts in this one. It's a nice little pond. You can see, oh yeah, let me show you this. These are duck eggs. There's 3 or 4 of them turned up the other day. They're not from ours, that's mallard eggs. And we've only got muscovies. So somewhere down here, a mallard decided to make a nest and got found. Somebody's had its eggs, but which is a bit sad, but it's pretty good when something that was a field 2 years ago has now got waterfowl trying to make home on it. That's encouraging. So this here is the spillway, same as all these swales and ponds have got spillways. That's the level sill spillway. So again, it'll sheet evenly over in that direction and be picked up by that swale there. And you can see this one, this end was actually dug by hand, which is why it's got such a nice curve to it. It's easier to do slightly straighter lines when you're doing with the digger. See, we got, I think these are sprouts, we've got brassicas, we've got all sorts of stuff growing out on this. We did tomatoes on it on the first year it grew. We put it in and they did really well. So we got burdock, we've got all sorts of flowers coming along. But the main crop here is this stuff, and this is Bowles hybrid willow, which we've got all along the eastern edge, and it's survived, it's done okay. But on the swales it's done spectacularly well, even in its first year here, 2018, when it was a drought year and we didn't have water up the field. And when you can see there, that's been watered 2 or 3 days ago. Even then, you know, these are the original ones actually, they grew to about 3 meters high. It was really impressive. with no irrigation, just part of the swale effect. And these are the density that they were planted at, and then we come to this section where they start to get a little bit thicker until over that end is, you know, 1 every foot or so. And the idea is that as they grow up, every year we cut. We don't burn at this point, we just make them into cuttings, put them straight back in the spring, so that eventually this swale berm, which will be significantly bigger than it is now, the ditch doesn't need to be, but the berm is, and that's going to be planted a willow. And this swale alone should give us enough willow to run our entire house heating on the rocket mass system. Because, I mean, you can see them little shoots there, that'll be taller than me. I'm 6 foot, and that'll be significantly taller than me, every one of them, by the end of the year. Well, by the end of the season. It's really impressive stuff. These are, I mean, the younger ones will go fast. These ones that are already established do incredibly well. Except they've been mulched a little bit with, that's poultry bedding. But, right, let's go back over the swale. So at this end of it, again, it's a bit windy actually. I'd have put the better sound suck on if I'd known. So at this end here, now there was a fruit tree here, so that's where I got some comfrey planted. Look at that, colours are lovely. Where are we? There. You know, that's red, but it's also got like a blue edge to it when it's new as well. Very cool. Loads of bees. Very cool. And at this end we've got another pipe monk, so I can choose to flood the swale and then have the overland water fill the swale in a severe weather event, rather than just running straight into the pond and away. So I can choose how much water I want to infiltrate. This is more or less going to be the model for all things like this that I do in future, because this feeds into a pond and the spillway is just a few inches lower than the bottom of this swale. So I can set this to fully drain and it'll just run itself completely. I haven't got to adjust any sort of monk for the drainage of this pond because the spillway is that little bit lower. This was the first real pond that I finished here. It's got a couple of goldfish in here, but they'll be hiding just now. It had a load of frog spawn in it this year. It's coming along quite nicely. There's all sorts of interesting plants in here in summer, but it's pretty empty at the moment. There's not a huge amount growing. Now some of the other ponds do have a huge amount growing, so I'm going to transfer some of those plants across to this one, just because, you know, see if that species mix suits it a bit better, because really this should be pretty much greened out by now. So we've got these little divots here, little holes. They got all sorts of stuff growing around them, like, where are we? That's chives there. Lovely. So, as I say, there's all sorts of little things like that will come up. But these are ponds that dry out when it's dry, but fill with water when it's wet. Because as the trees come up all around us and the pond gets a little bit more shaded and everything grows in a little bit more, it'll stop being quite so much like scorched earth every summer, and they'll stay as damp patches all year round. And even now it doesn't rain for a while, but you can see that's a bit, you can see the moisture in the bottom there, so with a bit more organic mulch building up, and they'll become nice little microclimates. So over here we've got another bench, because if you're doing earthworks, you're unearthing stone and you want to put the stone in for thermal mass, you might as well shape it into something nice to sit on. And in this case, I've even got a little footrest. So, right. So yeah, the idea with this is that no matter which way the wind's blowing from, there's a bench facing the right way that I can get out of it. I was growing duckweed in these tubs last year. They just failed eventually, I don't know why. So yeah, I haven't really rushed to plant up this berm, but you can see it's a really sheltered little microclimate. Where the spillway is, there's some clumping bamboo, 3 different clumps there. As it gets bigger, I'll divide that out so that it'll completely fill, where are we? Yeah, completely fill this space here, so that'll give us a layer up to this sort of height, because I don't want anything too high here, because again it'll cast too much shade on any systems to the north, and it doesn't really need it because it's got this nice little sheltered spot here. In fact, it's quite nice down here today. I can just see one of the fish. Is it? No, it's still off again. Let's have a look. Anyway, so yeah, little steps again, all the way out the stone that I just pulled out the ground, up out. So it's never happened yet actually, but if that spillway there did activate, that water will flow downhill and get picked up by the bottom swale there. Let's go and have a look at that. So this is the bottom swale. Currently this is the lowest one that we've got on the land. I haven't really got much planned lower down than this, but there will be earthworks lower down, but there won't be swales. Exactly. Now you can see here that when we brought diggers through, that's created quite a bit of damage. I need to fix that before winter. We're not likely to get a huge amount of water flowing before then, but yeah, it's not a huge repair, it doesn't take much. In the bottom of this ditch here, we've got the ramsons are just starting to come up, so they'll spread out. I'm thinking of putting another aquatic filter down here just to take bigger surges. So for example, if I decide to empty the duck pond or the paddy field into the swale, it fills it completely, whereas if I had a nice pond filter down here, nice big one, it doesn't have to do anything fancy with stonework, but you know, a nice one, that'll give me another yield and it should absorb that water a little bit better. And I obviously want the ramsons to spread up the swale, because yeah, well, ramsons are great. At the end of this swale, I'm not going to go off and show you the duck system and the rice paddy and all the rest of it. I've done all that in a separate video. But at this end of it is this. Now, when this monk pipe is fully vertical, no water flows through this. This spillway activates, and that has happened in an extreme weather event. We have actually seen that spillway activate, and because that's also going to be taking all the water from the house eventually, which it isn't. Obviously it's taking all the runoff from the barn, which needs a lot of work, but you know, that's still 100% runoff currently, and all the rest of it has meant that this spillway has actually been activated. But it had run over here before it ran through this pipe when it's set to fully up, which is what it mostly is. I've been playing around with them lately, which is why it's down. Because generally we don't want that nutrient loaded water going into that pond. I've got this fitted, so I've got that option should I choose to, if I change the use of the crater garden pond, but at the moment I don't really want that nutrient water going in. And the main purpose of this pipe here is so that if the outflow pipe, which is just a vertical pipe, it's not adjustable, that sets the water for that pond in there, if that got blocked, then you know, if it backflooded it badly enough, at the point the water reaches pretty much the level of the seating section on the stone bench, water would start to flood out of this when it's at fully vertical. So this then effectively becomes the spillway for that pond as well. So yeah, that's the crater garden. We'll go and have a little look at that now. So this is the crater garden. It's basically the most sheltered spot that I've been able to create on the Croft. It's a big round berm that way south, so just to the left of where the stone bench is, round to about here, is the section that directly faces south. And from here, you see there's the first one of them, from there all the way around the crest to roughly just to the right of where that little stone is there. That whole area has these, and these will grow to 3 meters plus high and wide. So you can see when they've come up, and it's completely evergreen, very wind hardy. That's going to all fill in. That's what is it? Eleagnus ebbingi. It's Ebbing silverberry. So that'll create a really protected lens pointing south. So on the inside section there is going to be very, very warm, very protected, and especially with the low winter sun, when that bounces off the pond, gives us even more sun effect. I'm not sure how much of an effect that'll have, but it'll be some. You can see they were given quite a drastic haircut last year, but all the new growth looking really well, so they're going to really come on. I think that's where the swale comes in. That's the spillway for it. There's the pipe muck coming through down to here. That acts as an emergency spillway, an emergency overspill for this. We know that it's fairly unconsolidated subsoil, really. It hasn't been compacted, but I know that it'll take water up to about halfway up that bench without bursting, because I've tested it. When the pipe got blocked, I'm not going to say it was deliberate, but we know it works. So on the berm as it is before, because we haven't planted this up to its final species yet, because the stuff that'll survive here now isn't the same as stuff that'll survive here once the ebbings is up behind it and we've got that proper block of protection all around. This is going to have some large stones, not necessarily in the shape of a bench. I'm thinking about actually buried into the berm itself, with just a little section of it sticking out as heat absorption, just to get that that heat into the berm, so we can get some really fairly tender stuff for this far north, hopefully getting through. But in the meantime, we might as well use it for something. So we've got a lot of leeks that are out, just because we had some spares. They went out last year. This is walking onion, so that won't put out a conventional bulb at the bottom. It does, but that's not what you eat. It creates bulbils at the top rather than seed, so you harvest them and you can use to propagate them. So I've got them in a few places, trying to get their numbers up so that I can use them in the understory of the food forest system when it gets a bit more mature. We've got globe artichoke. They seem to do either really well or die really quickly. This is its second year, just coming back. That's one of the ones that seems to be doing quite well. And apart from that, we've just got things like borage, there's turnip, radish, all sorts of seed have gone in, all through all this earthworks. It was seeded last year, but most of it died back for the winter. You can see over time we found out that after about 2.5 years there's enough straw from the mass that builds up through the summer to protect the soil pretty much through the winter. So that's pretty good. You can see that here we've got the sorrel starting to bush out, the clovers and so on. That's what Phycelia, there's all sorts of stuff, but some of it remains through the winter. And it's a little borage. There's a lot of that. So yeah, in a couple of months you won't really be able to see this. You won't see any earth, it'll all be covered up. So we've got a lot of perennials down here because it's a fair way from the house, so you don't want to be down here having to adjust things all the time. So yeah, we've got the rhubarb. There's a load of them crowns gone in. Now this section here is always wet, even when we haven't had rain for weeks. This stays wet, so I'm going to deepen it slightly and use it as a growing pond of some description, just because we might as well make use of it. So yeah, that's the currently the lowest earthwork we've got. I've got some modifications I'm going to do to this year. So I'm going to sink some big slabs in there, big chunks of stone that I've dug up elsewhere. I'm going to put a canopy over this, because in winter it's too cold and it's too wet to sit on, really, for a lot of the year, unless you really like having a very cold bottom. So yeah, the plan is to put a structure over it. I've got a lot of driftwood and bits and bobs I'm pulling off the beach for the last 6 months before the lockdown, so I'm going to use that to make a canopy over it, and we can keep the sun and the rain off it in the right season. So in winter, when the sun's really nice and low, that'll come in and it'll warm it up nicely. So on a nice sunny cold winter's day, it'll still be fairly comfortable, but when it's raining I can still come down here and sit and spend some time down the pond. Because yeah, I mean, it's easy to try and spin this as, this is my lovely permaculture system, and it is really pretty. You can see there's the overspill for it. There's just water running down. It's a vertical pipe set in, and all the, it used to be quite loud, but with all the plants that have come in, they really dampen the sound, which is quite nice. So there's a mesh so I don't get large amphibians down there. But yeah, that's the overspill where the drainage grid that we use at the top of the field, but has been filled in most other places. This is, we cut into it over there and then dug this huge basin, and this is where it would run out. So this pond would be about 18 inches lower, but what I did was I put this vertical pipe down over the little pottery, terracotta, whatever you want to say, that little horizontal pipe. So we put the blue pipe down on top of it, and this was something that I found on the side of the road that had bounced off the back of a van. Packed clay all around it, and that's brought the entire level up to here, and that is now what sets the level for this whole pond system. And water trickles through it most of the year, so it's fairly reliable water, which is, it's nice. It's always a fun place to spend time. And yeah, it'll produce a load of food and it'll be sheltered and all the rest of it, but really it's just it's somewhere nice to come and sit for a while, because who says that you can't have agriculture that looks pretty? So yeah, that is the quick overview, quick walkthrough of the earthworks. You can see all 3 swales stacked up, and then all the spillways. So water theoretically landing on that barn runs all the way through that swale, potentially through the spillway, down, gets picked up by the second swale, all the way along that swale, through that spillway, gets picked up by this next swale down, the third one down, fills that swale, this spillway here activates, comes down overland here, ends up in this swale, and then uses this spillway and down. And ultimately there will be more plans down here as well, but currently that's the end of it.